Hi, Susan. How are you today?
Hi, Seal. I'm good. And doing a podcast on video has me a little nervous. So I'm just going to admit that right up front.
We haven't done this in a while. I do think it makes us both a little bit nervous, but it is fun to do this because what we do is really visual. And
Mhm.
a lot of times we can talk through things and you can supply some wording and lists on your blog. But this is for those of you who are listening on a listening device only, this is going to be on YouTube so you can see things. And we recommend, even if you listen to it first, to go to Susan's blog and click on the link for YouTube and see what Susan's sharing today. What are you sharing? One of my favorites.
Today we're talking about pleated ruffles, and it's sort of a full circle for me because the very first class I ever taught for Cheryl Strickland at one of the custom home furnishings conferences in 2003 was designing details. And in that class, one of the things I showed was pleated ruffles. And so now here we are, 2025, and pleated ruffles are back, and ruffles are back.
Yes.
I'm excited to see that. Uh, from my career, I started my workroom in the late 1980s. So that was the 80s, 90s, and into 2000. I mean, the design, what I learned on and what my designers were doing was valances and draperies and pillows and slip covers with ruffles,
Yes.
gathered ruffles, pleated ruffles, ruffles with banding, double ruffles, everything had embellishment on it and lots of
Yes.
fringe and trims.
Yes.
And, it kind of went away from that, went into the era of grayish and white and like banding and maybe as a trim, tape trims are really
Right.
popular. And fast forward in 2025, we're seeing some softness and ruffles coming back.
And Susan, I've always loved the tape trims. I love Roman shades. I love like elegant draperies with a flat braid trim on them. I love embellishments. I don't necessarily use it in my own decorating, but when I get the chance to do it for someone, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and the trend now, there's a couple names for what we're seeing. Maximalism is one, and Grand Millennial, which I learned from one of our 20-something aged students here at Workroom Tech. They love, the younger generation really loves that combination of prints and patterns and softness and
Mhm.
detail.
Yes.
And gathered ruffles are certainly popular. We're not going to talk about gathered ruffles today. Uh,
Right.
and gathered ruffles are a little easier to make and probably more mainstream. So if you want to have something that's high end, that's custom, that is through a professional workroom, pleated ruffles require
Mhm.
more skill level, more time, and they can be made out of practically any fabrics and in many, many different ways.
Right.
So today we're going to look at pleated ruffles. And I have very, I have examples here of box pleated ruffle,
We
nice
have
pleated
props.
ruffle, props.
I love props.
And just keep in mind, I'm going to show some videos that the type of fabric you use can change the way the ruffles look.
Yes.
You might decide the style of the ruffle based on the fabric,
Hmm.
and combining prints is really cool. But having a monochromatic drapery, imagine a silk drapery. Silk's coming back. I'm so excited.
Oh, I am too.
Yeah, a solid color drapery with a solid color pleated ruffle. It just adds that extra detail, all tone on tone. And that's beautiful too. So it doesn't have to be French country, English
Right.
inspired chintzes and things like that.
But Susan, I think that's one of the things that we sometimes sell ourselves short as custom workrooms. You can make a luxurious custom made product that has details, but it isn't maximal. It
Mhm.
isn't 15 colors in a room. It isn't. So it really doesn't matter what our client is looking for. We have a way to produce a luxurious and elegant and custom product that suits their taste,
Mhm.
but maybe since trends come and go, finds a way to be a little less trendy,
Yeah.
but still leaning to what we love. And if we love to see a lot of fabric, a lot of embellishment, we can do that.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine a linen drapery, a solid color linen drapery with, a beautiful embellishment down the leading edge and all out of the same fabric. And then on the furniture, you can do the prints and things with the pillows.
Right.
It just really takes it up a notch, and it gives us an opportunity for custom products.
Hmm.
You're not going to get a pleated ruffle in a custom fabric without ordering it through a workroom.
Right.
That's what we want to encourage, right?
Right. Right.
We love those design trends.
Yes, we do.
So I have a video. The first thing I'm going to do though, before I put the video on, is I'm going to be talking about marking the ruffle to pleat to the marks.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go rogue and say, forget that. We're just going to eyeball it.
Oh, I'm twitching.
But for marking, there's if you want to make a template, this is a piece of, I keep this papery, inexpensive buckram just for making patterns. I don't use it in draperies, but it's great for making patterns. So when I do scallop patterns and things, I just use this. It's not an iron on. Anyway, so I just used a hole punch and
Oh,
holes in. So we can lay this along the edge of the folded strips that have been sewn together
okay.
for your ruffle. And you can just put like a disappearing marker and just do like dot, dot, dot in the holes.
Perfect.
And I also, on the blog, on the Workroom Tech blog, have a instruction that can be downloaded and printed.
All
Uh,
right. Terrific.
how to do the spacing for a knife pleat ruffle and a box pleat ruffle.
Okay.
That's what we're focusing on today. And then there's a couple books that I will mention. Well, one of them I'm showing on the video. The other one that I want to share is The Art of Manipulating Fabric.
This book.
Oh my gosh, such a fantastic book. And by Colette Wolfe. And starting on page 62 is
Oh,
all types of box pleat
okay.
and knife pleat ruffles and double box pleat and all these things you can do that go beyond what I'm showing today because it's 30 minutes with Workroom Tech, not
Not 3 days.
not 3 days. But get this book and be inspired and make some samples and try that. And then the last thing I'm going to recommend before we go to the video is in the 2008 issue of Custom Home Furnishing magazine. I did an article and my name was different. My last name was different back then.
Okay.
But on page 46, 47 of the issue number 2 of 2008 Custom Home Furnishings magazine, I did a traveling sales tool embellishments roll up that you unroll it and it has all these different types of ruffles. So there was a knife pleat, a box pleat, a double box pleat, pickup box pleat, and they're all, in this nice little package. You roll it up and tie it in a bow. And it's just something that you can have to put out there and show your designers, show your customers, and inspire them because there's going to be styles of ruffles they've never seen before. And so that can be found on the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library.
Okay. I'll put a link to that in the show notes and send you that in the blog too.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so let's share my screen and let's go to the workroom. Okay, there we go. So you'll start with the pleated ruffles by cutting strips of fabric, the finished size you want it to be, plus an inch. And that's for 1/2 inch seam allowances. Sew your pieces together and press with the right sides out. And this fabric is sort of thick for a ruffle, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not going to be a crisp, flat ruffle. It's going to be a little softer. This is a polyester cotton blend woven, but it's a beautiful color, and that's why I wanted to use it.
Yes, it is. And I love the weave in it too,
Yeah,
Susan.
yeah.
It's visible, so that adds some interest.
And then you'll serge or sew across the top, and that ravels really bad, so I did serge across the top.
Okay.
And here I go. I'm going to mark. I'm using a Sharpie. Don't use a Sharpie, but it'll show up on camera. And so I'm marking for a knife pleat. So what my finished pleat size is going to be 3/4. So I'm marking 3/4 and then doubling that to 1.5. So 3/4, 1.5, 3/4, 1.5.
Okay.
And you could do that on a template, as I showed earlier, and just lay that down and mark the dots. But I'm just going to mark for a little ways and then get started. Sort of a way to get started and get sort of a feel for how much I'm pinching under.
Okay.
And then go mark to mark. And then the big spaces are what you're pleating. And if you fold towards yourself, then the toes of the presser foot are not going to get hung up in the ruffle.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
And since you've serged the edge, now the outer edge of the ruffle is very even. So when the folds are, you don't have to focus as much on are you lining it up because
Yeah.
you're lining up the serges.
Yep. And so now I've gone past the marks and I'm just going to practice doing this without marks. You can eyeball it. And I'm a firm believer in custom sometimes isn't perfect.
But
And
once you've started, you can see where the back fold is in relation to the other one, so you can get a feel for it.
yeah, I think there's some value in things that are handcrafted, looking a little bit handcrafted.
Okay.
Don't go crazy and have 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1 inch. Keep it
Right.
consistent.
They all look perfectly even to me.
And you do need 3 times fullness. So this was 2 cuts of material, and you can see how small that pleated up to. So now
Yeah.
we're going to do a box pleated ruffle, and I'm doing a 1.5 inch box pleat ruffle. So I'm marking 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. This fabric, it would be very difficult to do a teeny tiny box pleat.
Right.
The smaller the pleat, the thinner the fabric should be. And so just marking it, and then we will do the same thing where we'll start off and then eyeball it. And again, using a Sharpie so you can see on camera. I don't recommend you use a Sharpie.
Susan, are you using a regular straight stitch or a walking foot for this?
This is a regular straight stitch. If you have a rolling foot, that could probably be helpful, but you're going slow.
Right.
You could use the walking foot. So I'm bringing a pleat towards me, mark to mark, and then the marks go the opposite way away from me. So then it's towards me.
And then as you're stopping and starting, Susan, like I know you have excellent control over your industrial machines. Do you ever feel like you go too far and have to back up a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Or on this one, the ruffle might get hung up on the toe of the presser foot. But this is slow going, and it's a great idea to time yourself as you're learning, and then you can kind of see you improve.
Mm-hmm.
Or, your speed will improve over time,
Right.
but that'll give you an idea of pricing. So
Yeah.
it's cutting, sewing, serging. Well, cutting, sewing, pressing, serging, and pleating. All of that goes into 1 yard of ruffle.
Right.
So I charge by the yard. And it's something that you sit and do for a while, your hands might get cramped up a little bit. I am going to show a tool that you can use coming up. I'm marking here with a red pen where the seam is, just so you can see there's a seam right there.
Right.
And you want the seam to be hidden. So I'm putting it to the back of a
Right.
pleat. It can also go inside of a pleat.
But that way it's not facing forward.
Yes. And as a reminder, after I sew across that, I'm going to put a pin that's now the front edge, the front side of the
I
ruffle.
just thought of that, Susan. I would go to all that trouble and then flip it around and make that the front of the pillow or
Right.
whatever it was being attached to.
Right. Yeah, if you find that the seam is falling in a spot where you don't want it to be, you would have to go and sort of like when you're pleating draperies, where you make the pleats a little different sizes
Hmm.
so that you can make it work out. And then this is called the quick pleater. It comes in different sizes from 4 inches to 1/2 inch. And you can buy this through the Workroom Marketplace or Home Sewing Depot. And I'm going to do a 2-inch pleat, and that would be something that you would see on the bottom of a slipcover skirt.
Right.
So you're using this tool, you're going double the distance of the size of the tool and then flipping it over.
Okay.
So I'm
I have
sort
a
of
set of these. I have not practiced with them. Now I'm
put the
gonna.
little fork on there and twist it around and then take it out. I don't know. So
I
I'm
feel
sort of
like
marking it double and then twisting.
this is one of those things that would become like the motor skill would come to you very quickly once you get started and do it a couple of times.
And some people do use like a fork that has only 2 tines
Hmm.
on the sides to make knife pleat ruffles. The box pleat ruffles are more complicated because you have to reverse and go the opposite way. So a tool like this doesn't work well for box pleat ruffles.
Okay. But it sure does for this.
Well, yeah, that's really nice. So this would be a beautiful addition on the bottom of a slipcover. And now I'm going to do a bias ruffle. So
This is my favorite.
when you have a gingham check, especially,
Mhm.
it looks so pretty on the bias. And you can do solids on a bias if you wanted to. But so this is strictly on the bias because it'll look good.
Mhm.
It's not because for any other reason. It's not because I'm going around curves or anything else. It's just going to look good.
And you can do this whether the rest of the object is the same fabric, or you can do it as a beautiful contrast fabric. Yeah, this is one of those things I love when I get the opportunity to do this.
And you could do a stripe. It would get a little funky looking as the pleats go along. So maybe do a test first before you make a commitment to something like a stripe. And so here we go doing freehand box pleated ruffles. And I'm sort of stitching into the serged edge. Keep in mind that you don't want to stitch further than a 1/2 inch down because you only have a 1/2 inch seam allowance there and you don't want the stitching to show.
So pretty.
And I don't press the ruffles down. I like them to roll.
Hmm.
And that also disguises differences in size.
Yes.
So if it's rolling, you don't notice if it's a fraction of an inch different from piece to piece. So here I'm going to show you how to join a box pleated ruffle on something like a pillow or a duvet.
So you don't pre-measure to get the exact length that you want. Okay.
No, that's too hard.
That's math.
Well, it's not math. I mean, there's take up
Yeah.
and it might grow a little bit or whatever. Um, so I'm sort of finding where a box is ending and the next box is ending and then seeing how much space I have left in between.
Okay.
I have to fill up. So that could either come together perfectly or
Right.
it might be too far apart, or it might be kind of close, but like right there is like it's a little too small. So I
Right.
have to move back a little bit and then move back a little bit. And so my pleats aren't going to be perfect across the bottom,
Right. That makes perfect sense.
but you're sort of going to ease them and take it a little closer.
Right.
And this these pleated ruffles have some movement in them, so you can sort of stretch them a little bit
Right.
and scrunch them in a little bit as well. So you're it's not as hard as it looks.
Well, and again, Susan, I think a practice is a great way to just anticipate what is going to happen or could possibly happen and gives you a good idea of how much time it's going to take you.
So now I've cut away excess, allowing for one side to tuck in on itself, and that's why I'm clipping across the top edge there, so I can sort of fold in about a half inch, and the other end can go inside.
Perfect.
And then the cut edge from the opposite side is going to tuck right in there. Now, if you wanted to figure out where the seam's going to be and sew it and turn it and press it and all that, yeah, you can do that. I'm
You
going to
have
do it this
permission
way.
to do that.
I'm going to do it this way.
I think that's just perfect.
And then replete it.
And I like how you finger pressed a little bit so that you could not have to redo it again each time after you opened it up,
Yeah.
which is probably what I would do.
Hold your mouth right and press everything down with your fingers and sew across it before. And hopefully you're not out of bobbin thread at this point.
People have no idea what we go through, Susan. Oh, that's beautiful. And I love the welt cord next to it.
Yeah. So then a little bit of glue in there is not a bad idea, or um, a little bit of a hand stitch would be
Okay.
perfect fine. Or I wouldn't use an iron-on tape because I don't want to press the ruffle down flat.
Right.
Because on something like a pillow, it is going to get used. So that'll hold that in place.
Okay.
But if it was up on a valance or something, it would be
Yeah.
fine. It's not going to pull out.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's that bias ruffle, and that is really a pretty design detail. And then here's the same fabric cut on straight.
Mhm.
So with something like this, you could go railroaded for no seams.
Right.
Perfect thing to do if you have waist pieces or you're cutting drapery and it's a solid color fabric. You could cut your strips off the side before you cut your pieces with the
Right.
drapery,
Right.
making sure you have 3 times fullness. So there's the two styles of box pleat, bias and cut on the straight.
Okay.
And then let's look at doing some fabric that could be done either way, across the grain or railroaded. And this fabric wouldn't work very well cut on the bias.
Right.
Fantastic cut up the bolt, railroaded.
Yes.
And that gives you that pretty sort of a stripe. And that you
Hmm.
can do this with any stripe design. And I have a picture coming up where when you fold it, it looks different on one side than it does on the other.
Yeah, because the I don't know what to call that pattern, kind of leafy.
Yeah.
It is different. Each stripe of it, it looks different. Really
And
pretty
so
fabric.
I'm going to do knife pleat here. And I'm just using the ruler there because I'm doing 1 inch just to get me started there on the
Okay.
size of the fold. So if you get an order as a workroom and the tier designer is requesting a pleated ruffle, it's a good idea maybe to show them a few choices.
Yes.
What do you prefer? Because you're going to see in a moment, you can get a really different look depending on how you uh,
Right.
ruffle and how you cut it.
Well,
So
and like draperies, once you pleat it up, it looks different than the initial fabric flat on the work table.
so now this is cut on the across the bolt, and I'm doing the same 1 inch pleat, and you can see it's not quite as pretty, right?
You're losing a lot of the blue.
And also, much like with pleated draperies with some fabrics, if you don't pleat a pattern, you get this sort of, you do get a repeating pattern, but it's sort of a mishmash. So it's like kind of white, then kind of blue,
Now,
then
I was
kind
going to
of
say, now there's lots of blue.
white. So it just, if it was my project and I was spending thousands of dollars for custom window covering, I would prefer the railroaded stripe
Yes.
to that stripe.
Right.
And it's not any prettier on the back.
But for those of you who would say, what would you do? My answer is always ask the client.
And now I'm going to do the same fabric and I'm going to do a box pleated ruffle instead of a knife pleat ruffle.
Okay.
So this is going to work better because I can put that blue on the front of each ruffle.
Right.
Now the stripes on this were not perfectly spaced. So on this fabric, it's like a small space, big space, small space, big space.
Right.
So the ruffle is going to vary the size of the pleat. It'll be a little deeper once in a while in order to keep the print on the top.
Yes.
But that does look better than the knife pleat. So if you are cutting across the grain, you might want to do a box pleat on a fabric like that.
Okay.
So let's look at some projects with, now that you know how to do box pleat ruffles. This is a valance and drapery, another valance and drapery. These are some of my old photos from years gone by. And this is that stripe I was talking about that
Oh,
had, you could get a different look based on which side you used.
Susan, that actually looked like a tape trim when you
Yeah, really.
showed that, which is also something you could make into a ruffle or a
And
pleat.
one of my favorite projects was published in Window Coverings by Brian Coleman, the book. And this was a girl's room. It had 4 windows, bed corona, duvet, slip covers, and pillows all had pleated ruffles.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was that was really a lot of work.
A lot of fabric to make all those ruffles.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember correctly, about 65 yards of pleated ruffles. So imagine how many cuts that is because it's 3 times fullness.
Yes.
And I'm just going to go back and while we're talking about it. Um, when you're working on a project that big, you can't just sit down and pleat 65 yards of pleated ruffles.
No, no, I guess you cannot.
So it's a matter of, doing all your cutting and sewing and having your strips ready. And I just put like a box of, on the back end of the sewing machine and just pleat and let it fall in the box.
Okay.
And then come back to it at another time. So, you can pleat like, 5 or 10 yards and then maybe do some more the next day.
Okay.
And if you have a helper that can cut strips, sew them together and press them, that saves a lot of time too.
Yes. I love the teeny tiny welt cord that's between the ruffles and the main fabric.
The little stripe
Yes.
cord.
Really beautiful detail.
Yeah, and I just love that it's all in the same fabric, except
Yes.
for that little detail, and that same stripe is used on the back of the bed. And I'm going to go back because I was want to show you that ruffle again. So there's the ruffle being made that was made out of the stripe.
Right.
That was cut, railroaded, up the bolt on the fabric.
Right.
And then you can see that stripe in the pillow itself. So both sides of the pillow look different.
Right, because the stripe that's on the back of the pleat is different.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. And then I love doing pleated ruffles on bolsters. And when I do this, the pleated ruffle isn't sticking off the end, it's inset a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's usually whatever size the ruffle is, there's a piece of fabric coming out there. Or on something like this where I have a tufted end that rolls out. And these are down inserts. So I don't like I prefer a bolster where the ruffle is up on the bolster and not sticking off the end of the bolster. I don't know how to explain that.
That looks beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute and come back to you. Another thing you can do, and please check out that book, The Art of Manipulating Fabric, because it's so beautiful. But this is a knife pleat ruffle that is stitched down the middle. Ooh. So that you can make a tube, turn it right sides out and press it, or I've serged it.
Oh, okay.
Because if this is getting sewn down,
right, no one will see it.
No one will see it. But the great thing about this style, especially if you make it from a thin fabric and make it really tiny, is that it can act like a gimp braid. So if you're covering up, an ant trail of staples on something like a shaped cornice board or lambrequin, or even on upholstered furniture, you can go around those curves.
Yes.
So it's really, and you can do it with a box pleat too, but the knife pleat's a little bit faster and easier.
Yeah, beautiful detail.
Thank you. So I hope people will give pleated ruffles a try, and let's bring some softness and ruffles back into our world.
It's a great idea. And I would love, once this is posted, if people have made some ruffles, to share it on your Facebook post, Susan, so we can see what other things people are doing. I'm sort of inspired now. I have to look for someplace I can put a ruffle.
Well, I hope you will. I was just thinking, I was looking through some old pictures trying to find some of my work I'd done over my career that had all that chintz and ruffles and prints and things. And I was reminded that the very first project I did when I started out on my own business with an interior designer was black and pink floral chintz balloon shades with double ruffles with pink and white polka dots.
Oh my goodness.
The black floral chintz. It had, they had like a 4-inch ruffle, and then you had a 2.5-inch ruffle and welt cord all on the bottom of those balloon shades. Now there might be a picture somewhere. It might be a Polaroid.
Oh, I would love to see that.
If I can find that, I'll share that, and maybe some other people can post the very first paid job that they had. And there was a headboard. It was a big bedroom. It was jams and all kinds of stuff.
I wonder if I have a picture of my first paid job. I will have to look. There's a challenge in and of itself.
Well, that'll have to be a separate podcast.
Yeah, I think so. Susan, thank you for sharing those ruffles. They are beautiful. They are one of my favorite things to make. I just don't get to do it very often. So maybe I'll have to do a little sample and show it to my designers and say, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it's, what's old is new again.
Exactly.
Thank you, Seal. It was fun.
Good to see you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed hearing about and seeing the ruffles that Susan was sharing with us today, as much as I did. Like I said, I absolutely love ruffles. Everything that Susan and I talked about will have links in her blog, and I will put a link to her blog in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great day.